Feel free to storm the stage.
Only in Manchester.
Yeah, absolutely. Only in Manchester. You're actually the biggest buyer of bears in Britain, is that right?
The day we need to start measuring stuff like that, we should just stop doing it. I think there's stuff you should just...
You hear that, everybody? Finance people?
Yeah.
And one thing I always give as a tip is nick from fast feedback businesses. Amazon does it, and Amazon is a fast feedback business which tests everything. So if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. If you look at all the companies that have been on the Fortune 500 or the FTSE for 100 years or more, in other words, they're really enduring. They're all marketing companies.
First up are two giants of the industry. Big hero of mine, a living legend who really does cut through all the noise and misinformation that clouds the true craft and importance of marketing. He recently commented that UK business was made great by innovators, creators, and pirates, but they were so successful that their grandchildren became accountants. Physics had Newton, and we have Sutherland to equally oppose our cost-cutting frenemies. Sorry if there are any finance people in the room. Rory is joined by a northern great who famously, after a £1 bet to set up a company, turned white goods into gold. A passionate campaigner for supporting young people in realising their ambitions, John Roberts will get Madfest out of the fridge and get things cooking. So, Ayo, let's go!
So this is fantastic because this is year one of marketing, advertising and disruption up north. And already I think it's the largest marketing conference north of Watford in its first year, which is amazing and gratifying.
Is it the only one?
No, there are others, I promise. It's actually, I think it's particularly appropriate because if you look at the UK's disruptive brands, they're disproportionately found up north. And I think it also helps, cheekily he said, to be actually based in a part of the country where creative people can afford to live, which is probably a bonus as well. So how do you feel being on stage?
Yeah, great. I mean, we were just laughing about it. Well, we're a couple of frauds, aren't we?
Both of us, yeah.
I was laughing. I was looking down, all you guys with all your marketing degrees, and neither of us have got one, and we're opening this thing. And I was looking down the list, and I noticed that Olivia McKee from We Buy Any Car, as an extremely well-known brand, is in the audience. And I was saying, why is she in the audience and why is she not here? And we're here as two frauds without any marketing qualifications whatsoever to open the show. So
feel free to storm the stage.
Only in Manchester.
Yeah, absolutely, only in Manchester. I mean, there is an interesting thing, though, which is that really innovative businesses, actually more often than they think, usually start with a founder who has a really sound and also really distinctive marketing instinct. I mean, you mentioned We Buy Any Car, okay? A work of genius to name your business that. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the room going, I wonder what they do, okay? And you said actually that they're the fastest brand to get from 0 to 90% awareness.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Ever in the UK. And if you look at Dyson, for example, he would think of himself as an engineer, but against opposition from everybody else in the business, he wanted to make the vacuum cleaners transparent, whereas everybody else wanted to make them opaque. And the conventional wisdom was nobody wants to see the dirt. But his logic was vacuuming is inherently more satisfying if you can actually see what you're extracting from the carpet. And so quite often, I mean, I always tease Greg Jackson from Octopus Energy, because they were originally going to be called something like Green Ecotech. And they were funded by a company called Octopus Capital, who demanded that they rename themselves Octopus Energy. And I said, if you'd been called Green Ecotech and you hadn't had a pink octopus as a logo, you'd still have 15,000 customers.
Yeah, you'd be dead.
Yeah, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
And so actually, if you make a really good study of entrepreneurialism, and you had actually the active marketing genius, which is there is one category, okay, where online retail has an obvious advantage over physical retail, which is appliances.
Yeah, for sure. I think the point that you make is, and I still have it today, which is that when I say to the team that if everybody says you're nuts, that's normally a green light for me, that you're on to something.
Yes.
Otherwise, everybody else is thinking of it. So just trying to evolve an idea that everybody else is doing doesn't tend to get you the cut through, doesn't tend to get you where you want to be. A great example of it, we were having a session in the cafe downstairs, was the idea of giving away a little green bear. I mean, what on earth has that got to do with washing machines?
You're actually the biggest buyer of bears in Britain, is that right?
Yeah. We don't make a lot of money out of them, it's got to be said. Although it's a bit like on Virgin, the salt and peppers.
Yes.
Of stolen from Virgin
Atlantic.
Yeah. And Gordon Ramsay's now banging on about his Lucky Cat brass things that get stolen as well. Don't know where he got that idea from. But the green bears we give out, so the drivers give them. We don't track any of it at all anywhere. But there's quite a lot of our drivers liberate a few and then sell them on eBay.
What?
And so your story about the potato.
Yeah.
And how they took the potato,
made it a royal vegetable,
because they couldn't get people to eat it, and asked them to guard it, but not guard it very well, and then everybody wanted them, and so on. We've done exactly the same with the bears. So stealing bears as a driver is a sackable offence, but we don't police it at all, because if somebody wants to steal a bear because there's a market on eBay for somebody that wants to go on eBay for whatever reason and buy a green bear for whatever they want to pay for it, why would we want to stop that? All we want to do is get green bears into people's hands, and if we can get them into hands of people that really want them and are willing to pay for them,
which by definition is someone
brilliant. And if some entrepreneurial driver can make £5 out of that, well, tick.
So there was a genius idea I heard, which I thought was beautiful, which is slightly similar, which is there was a company that was selling something like cladding for homes. And the biggest cost they had in their business, effectively, was sending out samples. They're about 6 inches square. And it was hugely expensive. And they got around the problem by selling the samples on Amazon for 99p. So they basically got Amazon to take, they just said, you can have all the samples you want, just go on Amazon. Of course, Amazon Prime then takes care of the
delivery on them.
And they get a tiny amount of money
Yeah.
for what used to be a huge cost.
Yeah.
And it's an ad for your brand, which is present in the home. Now, the interesting thing about it, of course, is that it's impossible to quantify the value.
So it is, and my phrase has always been, the day we need to start measuring stuff like that, we should just stop doing it. I think there's stuff you should just...
You hear that, everybody? Finance people? Yeah. Right, okay.
There's stuff you should just believe in. That's easy from my position to be able to do. And so, I don't particularly, if I want to create a budget for something, I'm able to just do it.
Yes.
But there's just stuff that if you believe in it, things like that, they're impossible to measure. There's loads of marketing nonsense around chucking mud at walls and excuses for waste, as I think about them. But equally, you can get far too down the road of PPC and attribution, and I think if you use either Google or Facebook's attribution, I think they're responsible for about 650% of your sales. So there's no actual truth in all that either, and last click, which click, what all that is, but there's more measurement in it. Whereas the sentiment that goes around stuff like bears and green vans and the soft stuff, as I think about it, but that has, the phrase I use internally is cash the check in the second half. So if we give you a bear today and we're in a low frequency purchase category, when do I get the benefit for that? I don't know. But once I'm getting the benefit for that, the structural advantage that I have over my competitors at that point is huge and very difficult to compete against.
Because you're right, because actually, if you think about it, appliances are a slow feedback business, aren't they? Because repeat purchase is slow. Banking is slow because nobody actually leaves their bank. They just become inert as a customer. And one thing I always give as a tip is nick from fast feedback businesses.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's used Amazon's call me back button. You have a problem, something doesn't arrive, you eventually get to a choice between live chat or call me back, and the phone rings in about 2 seconds. Of course, they know who you are. You don't have to go through a whole load of pre-clearance nonsense. And I said to a bank, why don't you do that? They said, well, we can't prove that it works. And I go, you kind of can, which is that Amazon does it, and Amazon is a fast feedback business which tests everything, okay? So if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. So I think what's happened, and actually Roger Martin talks about this, the worst effect of the power of finance and the shareholder value movement in business is you have a finance function which demands an absurd level of proof and certainty for everything you do.
Well, and speed.
And speed.
Yeah, so you know, we've been through a roller coaster over the last 25 years on AO, and when you're in difficult times, what gets cut first? Marketing budgets.
Of course.
TV advertising is always one of the first things to get cut because you can have the saving immediately and the impact doesn't happen for a while.
Of course.
And so, you know, in our case, whether it's giving out green water bottles or giving out green bears or whatever it is, the payback on that is slow. And so, you know, I always talk about spray marketing money around when you've got loads of money, fix the roof while it's sunny, and invest in lots of the long-term things when the budget is available. But when you get, you know, I always say there's three types of accountant in this world. There's the ones that can add up, and there's the ones that can't. And so when you get them involved,
yes,
I've spent £1. What have I got back for it? And if you can't demonstrate that in the digital world in a week, in a month, in 2 months, 3 months, you're really pushing it. You don't build brands, you don't build reputation, you don't build feel over 3 months. And so it needs, and this is why I think founder-led businesses
completely right,
really have an edge over corporate businesses because you're able to think more long-term. And it's that thing, I just believe in this, so I'm going to keep going. Your James Dyson, he didn't start off thinking about a clear. It was a progressive series of steps, but everyone said he was mad.
Yeah. By the way, Jeff Bezos, everybody thought Amazon Prime was nuts, except Jeff.
Yeah, and now, Marketplace was nuts as well.
Marketplace was a nuts idea.
You put competitors on your own site.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Amazon Prime, what is it? I think 120 million American households have it. But
15 million in the UK now.
With Amazon Prime, is it? And you have your own version, don't you? Which everybody thought was nuts.
Yeah, so exactly. Again, you know, so we've launched AO membership, which is £39. You get free delivery, free recycling, and some member discounts on products. And everybody said it won't work. You don't have the frequency of purchase. Nobody will pay to join an electrical member retail scheme. So I went and spent a load of time out in the US with, they've both retired now, but Richard Galanti and Craig, who were the CFO and CEO at Costco, who, big lesson for everybody, people tend to be generous with their time. I must have spent 3 or 4 days with the two of them out. You had to fly to Seattle was the only catch. But Amazon were there as well, so they're a competitor, but Jeff Wilkie was running retail, then Dave Clark was running retail. They were really kind with their time. And the takeaways that I took away from Amazon were box sets sell toothpaste, which I know sounds simple, but they can track very, very clearly the more box sets and video you watch, because when they went into video, everyone said they were nuts and it was a vanity project.
Yep.
But if you watch more box sets, you keep your Prime, you buy more toothpaste. So as a metric, that was one of their measurements for it. And from Costco, just the absolute obsessional cost out model to be the most efficient and fix the margin that they make and return everything on the shared economics model to customers. And it takes time. The early days.
And they're actually very generous to their employees, aren't they? They always pay way over minimum wage, and they get beaten up for it all the time, but they refuse to budge.
Yeah, and they can do.
Yeah.
Because they are so ruthlessly efficient. And they actually run about, I think it's about a 5 billion net operating loss. So they make as a profit 5 billion as a loss against what they get in membership. So their members pay for the business to exist, in effect, and then they operate the business, in effect, at a loss. And it's so ingrained in their culture, whereas what do we do generally in business? You go, how do I make more money?
How do you make it more transactional and less relational?
The idea of saying, right, well, if twice as many buy, we make twice as much money, going, well, hang on a minute. If we can get the same amount of people to buy twice as much, what about if we shared 70% of that back with them, and we'll just take a bit more, but it'll last for a lot longer?
Of course. Actually, how are they owned, Costco? Are they shareholder owned or are they privately? I'm just trying to...
It's listed.
It's listed, yeah. So how they managed to do that? Because I always think the marketing fraternity and agencies in general made this terrible mistake, which is they got fixated on the idea that you could prove everything. okay? And the whole thing was marketing accountability. And they had this fantasy world where basically you knew the value of every dollar you spent and you knew exactly where to allocate it. And unfortunately, that is true, but only in a very limited sphere of marketing. The rest of it, you have to some extent, either it's slow, you've just got to wait. I mean, you could prove the value of a bear, after all, couldn't you? You'd have a control group of customers to whom you refuse to give bears.
But for me, it's the classic 10-year overnight success story.
Yeah.
How many businesses are a 10-year, you're toiling away, you're working it out. We talk about it as the FAFO project of just sort of fuck about and find out. You don't really know what you're doing. But we're relaxed about that. It isn't a problem. And the 10-year rule is incredible, where you're much better in a private arena doing that, not as a listed business. But again, as a founder listed business, you get a bit of a pass. Because he's that entrepreneurial crazy founder and he sort of gets a bit of it right. Oh, go on, we'll back him type thing. Whereas if you're more corporate, you're meant to play the game more.
Yeah, and actually, a very interesting thing, by the way, which never occurred to me in 30 years working in the business until I read it in a book by John Kay. If you look at all the companies that have been on the Fortune 500 or the FTSE for 100 years or more, in other words, they're really enduring. They're all marketing companies. It's all P&G, Nestle, Unilever. And John Kay's explanation is the focus on the customer, as distinct from the focus on operational efficiency, keeps you agile and relevant over time. Whereas if you actually focus on operational efficiency, you end up being very efficient at doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
In other words, you're doing the wrong thing right, which is actually worse than doing the right thing wrong. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, well, but it's that point about it takes time for marketing to grip.
Yep.
And so, Jeff Bezos would say that, look, I don't really want to talk about this quarter's results because they're the output of what we did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So what you really should be doing is you should be looking at what we are doing today, and that'll be the output in results in 3 years.
In 3 years' time.
And the most interesting thing when I did our IPO, which was 10 years ago, was, and I said this to lots and lots of different investors, where we sort of had quite a cultural clash, me and investors generally, is one of the biggest inputs of value is the culture in the business. I actually believe it's all gone a bit far, if I'm honest, and been accelerated through COVID with work from home, and as a creative audience, it amazes me how many of you lot work from home when I think you're all so much better and more creative bouncing ideas off each other together in a room rather than a screen. But culture in an organization often defines the customer experience. For us, getting drivers to care, that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah.
And so no investor...
When you think about it, it's two very different jobs, isn't it?
Totally.
Navigating a van through busy traffic for 2 hours and then being really nice.
Well, and delivering a smile rather than a washing machine.
Yeah.
And so, but no investor that I've ever met has any metric whatsoever for measuring the state of the culture in a business. Yet you're investing today for what the performance of that business is going to be over the next 3 years, that's largely going to be defined by the people in the business and how well they're working together over the next 3 years. But they all measure it on what happened over the last 3 years and think that is what's going to inform the next 3 years. For me, it's nuts.
You're absolutely right. I've never seen a cultural... I mean, David Ogilvy was the huge sort of prophet of this, which is that your corporate culture is a major source of competitive advantage.
But it sits on the balance sheet at zero.
At zero. You're absolutely right, yeah. And nobody's actually looking at HR data like staff retention, for example, where the difference between an experienced call center person and a new person in terms of their customer effect is monumental. I mean, that's another interesting thing, which is you invest a lot effectively in customer experience. Anybody who's had an AO delivery will know you're kept brilliantly informed. You're never in that kind of dithery state where you're hovering in under house arrest for a day and a half, wondering when something's going to turn up, okay? And there are text messages, and I think you can actually contact the driver directly, can't you?
Yeah.
Which is almost unique, you see.
And I think, so one of the way I talk about that internally is the best service is no service, which also happens to be the most profitable service. So costs walk into businesses on legs, and every time we have to interact with you as a person, it costs us money.
Yeah.
So, and we do actually bizarrely have people that ring our call center for a chat. I know it happens.
You know,
No, but and that's probably, that we should take that as a nice point of the brand and how nice our people are. But normally you're only ringing to speak to us if something's wrong.
Got it.
Or you want some help. And if you want some help, it's because we haven't provided the information correctly on the website in the first place to you. And so we need to take all that as our fault that you've had to ring us, and we should be pushing that information to you, ideally, just as you're thinking about needing it. And again, that's for us about all the vertical integration and owning the vans. Nobody cares about your business like you do. All carriers, pretty much, are shit. And, if I said Yodel, has anybody ever had a good experience with Yodel?
Actually, I'm going to, weirdly,
Go on.
generally bad, but we had one local driver who was really good. So, of course, it is highly spotty.
So therefore,
it
he
depends
makes
on
the
who,
difference.
who your individual driver is.
Yeah, but normally they're playing javelin with your parcel from across the road.
Yeah.
And if it happens to be a PlayStation, well, it might not work.
There's a very interesting failure in e-commerce, which is because the decision as to who delivers is taken by procurement, okay? I would argue that nearly every e-commerce business would sell a lot more if it offered people a choice of who delivered. Okay, not in your case, because yours is obviously for small items, it would apply in your case.
Yeah.
Offer people, because some people like Royal Mail, some people like DPD, generally people have a preference. And if you advertised up front that if you're paying for delivery, you should choose who delivers, which seems reasonable to me, right? Okay, and instead it's a procurement decision where they're driven to put everybody through the lowest cost supplier. And in probably 20 or 30% of those people will discover at the last minute that that's who's delivering and will drop out of the basket.
Yeah.
Because 20 or 30% of people will have a really strong aversion to any given carrier. And it's always struck me that that's a classic case of the finance people making a decision which the marketing people should be making.
It's one of the things that I quietly take credit for on Amazon. In my time with Dave Clark, when we were doing the membership thing, he asked me, what would you change about Amazon's business in the UK? And they just launched Amazon Logistics, where, some pretty shitty, they'd screwed the price on everyone so hard. It was the great Amazon experience, but what actually turned up at your door was some disheveled tramp in an old car on 50 pence a week. And I said to him...
By the way, if you want to do a favour for your Amazon delivery people, use locker delivery. Because the drivers basically get paid per delivery. So if they can drop off 8 things at a locker, it's like hitting pay dirt. So that's your bit of ethical consumerism for the day.
It's like coming to our reception at Christmas where they come with a whole van.
Of course.
And so my idea for him was, why don't you, with all your scale, why don't you go and get thousands of Amazon branded vehicles and then force your contractor to use your van? So at least when you turn up to a customer's house, the presentation of your delivery is much better. And then about 6 months later, thousands of these things.
I noticed.
I was like, fuck, keep your mouth
The
shut.
only worry about that actually is that I think they may have had a fear in that people would be aware how much they contribute to road congestion if they realised how many vans there were. I think that was one fear. But funnily enough, it's very interesting that the super premium delivery firm UPS are absolutely religious about livery.
Yes.
So when a UPS van is finished, they trash it. There are no second-hand. So they're absolutely, every single vehicle is brown and conforms, and uniforms conform to. It caused a bit of a problem when they launched in Germany because you were forced to wear a brown shirt, which has connotations. But apart from that,
Germany didn't go well for us now.
But you've got to tell us about the bet, by the way, the £1 bet, which started the whole business in the first place.
Yeah, well, so I'm not a marketeer, I'm not a techie either. I am the ultimate fraud. I'm just a salesman. A friend of mine was a guy who was a strange guy. Unfortunately, he's no longer in this world, but he was a van driver during the day and a quantum mathematician at night. And he was the weirdest bloke. He was a complete contradiction, and we should never have met. And I met him in the pub. We got on well. And over 2 or 3 years, he kept banging on about this thing called the internet. This is sort of 97. And I was saying, I reckon you could flog gear on it. And he was saying, it's not about that. It's about information. And, organized. Google didn't even exist at the time. It was Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves, I think it was.
Yahoo.
And Yahoo back in the day. So anyway, we had our £1 bets, whether we were playing pool or whatever we were doing. And so on Christmas Eve 1999, he'd had enough of me banging on about flogging gear on it. And he said, right, I'll bet you a £1 bet that you don't close your kitchen business in Manchester and actually do this and get on with it. So I took the bet.
So like Trading Places, it was £1.
It genuinely was. I have it in my bar at home. It is there. It is framed. Somebody, interestingly, Henry Moser, who collects old notes, gave me recently a crisp, old-fashioned £1 from the mint note. So I've got that framed as well. Yeah, people give me £1 because it's quite good, actually. On my way out, if you could all...
Well, I mean, it's been worse, actually, a lot more than that to everybody in the room. So you wouldn't feel... This has been absolutely astonishing advice. And I think what is so interesting is that the entrepreneurial mindset is vastly more marketing friendly and vastly more long-term friendly, and that's not a coincidence, than the corporate mindset. The corporate mindset has become... Because effectively, if you demand complete certainty, the natural first thing is cost cutting, because it's quantifiable and it's immediate.
Well, so I think, and for people in the audience, I think that sort of looking at this from the other way around, I think the biggest thing that you can deliver to somebody like me, if you like, somebody leading a business, is confidence in the idea. And so I would always challenge you to ask why this delivers confidence. Why should I be confident about this? Because I've had many, 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 many pitches over the years, and some of them have been good. Most of them are not. And most of the ones that are good, you believe are good, because of the passion and the confidence and the commitment to it that people deliver. And that would be the single biggest thing. And it's the same whether you've got confidence in the crazy idea, if it's a design and marketing pitch to somebody, why are you passionate about it comes through in body language in every single way of what you're doing, would be my takeaway.
Absolutely fantastic. John, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Huge hand there. Wonderful.
Cheers, pal.
What a pleasure. Thank you ever so much. All right.